Okay, so welcome in this lovely session, which will deal a bit about the future. So welcome also to the persons that are online with us. Thank you very much for taking your time. We are here in Istanbul. In the previous session, we had a look on the current situation, on how are different elements that influence young people in a NEET situation currently. And this session is dedicated to the future. So my first question to all of you is, in which types of times are we living in? And what do you think, in which types of time the future generation will live in? And most precious question is, what is your relation with the future? A lot of people are considering the future very challenging. But looking back at history, I also think that we are the privileged ones. For example, I've read a very interesting book lately, which is very famous, written by Hans Rosling, Factfulness. And in that book, you can see why things are better than you think. Because based on data available, we might live the best times in history, these times, even if they are so challenging as we think. Nevertheless, when we discuss about the future, some people are very excited. Personally, I have plans until I'm 80 years old. Only after I don't know what I will do. But until 80s, I want to go to space. I don't know about what's your plan. But other people, when we discuss about the future, are very depressed because a lot of information is coming on them. So I'm very happy that in this discussion about the future, we have with us two extraordinary experts that are shaping the world around them through their knowledge. If you Google a bit their names, I was very impressed when I see their CVs. But I was very honored that they had the time to speak with us. And I'm very honored that hopefully they will also shape our understanding about the future from their perspective. But before introducing them, I would also like your contribution in this discussion, also for the ones that are online with us. For that, we prepared Menti. So if you go on menti.com and you introduce a code there, we will use also that space to have comments and to interact. And now, I'm very happy to have on my right side, Oğuz Demir, who is the head of Digital Economy and Marketing Master Program and Associate Professor of Economics at Istanbul Commerce University. He holds a PhD in economics, and he also worked across the globe. We know that you worked in the States as well, and also in Russia. So you have a global perspective of economics and how this influenced the future. And he's also a very well-known author and a guest speaker to many television in Istanbul and Turkey. I've heard, huh? You need to check. On my left side, coming from Scotland, we have John Loughton, who is a social entrepreneur. He works on youth rights. He is one of the person that leaded campaigns, charity campaigns. He managed to gather millions of euros to help social causes. He's also a CEO of a global company, which is called Dare to Lead. As a speaker, he addressed the White House, the UN General Assembly, Tech Talks as well, now our conference as well. But he has a very strong voluntary background. He knows what youth work means. He also was elected as Prime Minister of the Youth Diplomatic Service to the G8 and G20 summit. He was working with the Prime Minister, and then he also worked with the Prince Charles. Or not?
Yeah.
So we are very privileged to have them in the room. And please use this space also to ask questions and also to interact with them. My first question to you will be, I will start with Ogu. With this impressive CV, what is your relation with the future? How do you envision 2100? Can you do that?
Let me try.
Okay.
But first, I should get the microphone. Okay. So this is how we do it. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. As she mentioned, and welcome Istanbul. I'm an economist, so we generally deal with some boring stuff. So before starting, I really apologize from everybody that I'm going to talk about those boring stuff. And as you imagine, while the economists start talking, they do the first thing like this. And now we're in 21. And what date?
2100.
Oh my God. Okay, generally we do this kind of something which you don't understand and which is done because for you not to understand. But this time I'm going to do something different. Okay, this is 2021. And as you see, Gandhi says, future depends on today. But there's one more thing. Future starts today. So we're part of future. If we're talking about there's a set of opportunities, set of futures, scenarios. We don't know. We can just try to understand it. So this is the set of future which consists both possible ones and impossible ones. So there is a future which is impossible, right? Preposterous. So we can say that this is a set of future which is preposterous. Okay, but the impossibility also includes some possibilities. So we can say that this is a future which is possible with the knowledge we have. So we're going through that future. I'm going to talk how we define it. But there is also a future that might happen. So it's the probable future. So we can easily figure out, what is coming. We can think about what is coming. So think about your parents or your families. 30 years ago, in Back to the Future movie that we were discussing, so we knew that the cars would fly, and they're now in the edge of flying. So that's something that you can imagine from now in the future. So it's not a long term, 2100. So 80 years.
Kind of.
One thing which is in this possible future is that I'm not going to exist. So that's one of the probabilities with the current knowledge that we have. But apart from these features, there is one feature which we really want to happen. So this is the preferable future. So of course, there is impossibilities, there is possibilities, probabilities, right? But apart from that, there is a preferred one. We want a future. And in this speech that you start, she said that somebody is optimistic, somebody is not optimistic or pessimistic. Yes, we have reasons to be optimistic or pessimistic. It's not something like a border and left-hand side is optimist and right-hand side is pessimist. So we have a future which has the possible, which has probable, which has impossibilities, which includes all of them. So here in that perspective, the question is, how do we achieve this preferable future? That is the main idea. How we're going to have a future. So we don't have any answers. Okay, it is easy for any futurists to say that the robots will capture the world and we're going to be the slaves of the world, right? These are some kind of futuristic approach. But let's do a little bit more scientific. It's not a science fiction, but let's do a little bit. Let's use some tools to analyze it. And as I said, the future starts from today. So to be optimistic, we have technology trends which are helping us to build the future. And these technology trends are useful for us to solve our current problems, which we name them as grand societal challenges. And I think the youth work is a little bit more about these grand societal challenges. When I say grand societal challenges, it's not like a world that we don't know. It's the world that we know. And there are many international institutions, including European Union, United Nations, trying to identify these grand societal challenges to be solved with these technological trends. And if we are a part of this preferable future, we have to understand these technology trends. What are they? Artificial intelligence, blockchain, augmented reality, virtual reality, digital media, right? These are like 12 currently defined technology trends will help us to build this future. And building this future is solving the problems. And what are those problems? You can go back to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Climate change, one problem. Inequalities, decent job status, and growth. But a high quality growth, not like a growth with harming the environment, creating new inequalities among the societies. No, it's a kind of approach that we use as technology trends to be able to identify this, to solve these grand societal challenges, and also to solve these problems to achieve our preferable future. But here, that's a very nice question. I know that I have 10 minutes, right? I'm going to use it in the most efficient way. So, we have been working about this in the last 5 years with some scholars from Spain, from Hungary, from Belgium, Netherlands, Russia, to develop some methods for the young people to be able to analyze their preferred future and then backcast from the future. We are always interested in forecasting, huh? What's going to happen? What is next? And especially nowadays, if you are living in Turkey, everybody asks this question: what's going to happen to the exchange rate tomorrow? That's the most popular question, because one day it's 10 and then the other day is 12. So I remember that 1 week ago I took the taxi from my home to the university. 15 minutes, the Turkish lira depreciated like 1 lira in 15 minutes. So we cannot look that forward. But apart from that, we have to understand this popular question. We have to reverse this popular question. We don't need to forecast. We need to backcast. So first, we have to go to the future, what we prefer to happen, and then we have to identify these milestones for young people. And this is the only way that we can build a better future for everybody. And here we have some lights around us. As I said, the technology trends and the grand societal challenges which need to focus on. I think I'm gonna dive deeper in the next areas. So
thank you very much. It's It's interesting to see how we can envision the future, but this we will go in future discussions. I will need a bit your mic.
Sorry.
Mind.
I was responsible to give it.
Yes, it's okay, and I will pass it because I want to see also, John, what's your connection with the future and what's your relation?
Hello, my name is John. I'm told to overthink. I'm told to crave control, and I don't know when to rein my energy back in. I make adults and professors feel uncomfortable because I speak the inconvenient truth. But don't expect a bloody apology from me, because what I talk about is to help a generation of let down youth. In life, the old saying goes that our elders want us to have better than they got. But for too many young people, that's a promise society forgot. Broken kids break. I'm sure we've all seen kids crack. It's not until we give them the future that we can get this world back on track. Possible, probable, preferable. 3 Ps that I just heard, but all meaning 3 very different bloody things. if I'd lived my life into the small prison of what I was told was possible, I wouldn't be here. I was the case study. I was the poor boy to be fixed. I was the guy that didn't fit in. I grew up being defined by everything I don't have. It's patronizing, it's labeling, it's stigmatizing, it's depressing. And like millions of other kids, I was expected to live down to society's expectation of my future. You can never be lectured on your future. You find your own, and you're part of the broader consensus of what we want that to be together. The question was, what period are we in? Well, challenge. Duh. But with the challenge we're in comes change. And I want to argue that what that change is for us, we're freedom fighters, we're role models, we're frontliners, we're change makers, we're heroes because we're bloody youth workers. You're not kind of a teacher. You're not kind of like an unpaid social worker. We're youth workers. We're entrepreneurs. We're founders. We're leaders. We're dreamers. We're lovers. Very good lovers. But we're also a bit broken. We're a bit raw. We like to live in the shadows of the paradigms and help redefine them. And do you know what? We're not in the art of doing. We're in the art of being. Hands up how many times you've tried to run a program with young people and they're not interested. Hands up who realized ultimately what they care about is connecting with you as a person. They want the relationship. They want the contact. They want the outreach. And for me, what I think is so critical is, I was sitting here thinking, and I wrote notes, but I confused myself, so I'm ignoring them, is what do we need to hear for us? Who fills up our cups? Because as a sector, we need to be resilient. As leaders, we need to have a command of what we want our future to be. And resilience or hope, my definition, is that even though every day of your history has been darkness, you've got the audacity to get up in the morning and look for the light switch. And you know, I study NLP, I look at behavioral psychology, I'm fascinated by people. And rule number one in behavioral psychology, and understand sort of basics of herd theory, is if you want someone to do something, recognize you can't make them do it. It's not in your gift to change them, it's only in your gift to control and change yourself. So if I want you to be optimistic and passionate and resilient, I need to ask myself those questions. And I want us to ask ourselves those questions as a sector. Are we adapting? Are we being resilient? Are we being challenging? Or are we giving it up because it's a little bit too hard? But we're doing such good things with the kids, it's a shame that no one's listening. Oh, but we're never going to get the funding, and it's always I get it. I ran my first campaign aged 11. I was judged for being the guy on the antidepressant pills. I was judged for coming from the poor neighborhood that is written off because of police and crime and violence, where dad was never around, the schools were never performing. We were just to give up. But the audacity of mindset, the spirit of youth work, to believe in something different, for me was what's critical. And that's the point we're at. We're being asked today as a sector, as a pedagogy, as an approach, as a coalition of believers in better, to react to a pandemic on the back of this thing that we call NEET, that particular group of young people. But I want to flip it. I think the future for us needs to be about realizing that in the last year or so, I think the rest of the world's conversation, the discourse, has moved onto our territory. I don't know about you, but in certain countries, what we're seeing is social connection is important. Face-to-face interaction matters. Understanding well-being. You know, the basics of any hierarchy, whether it's Maslow or whoever, you know, food, shelter. And lots of us in the human rights space are going, we were trying to knock that door down 20 years ago, 40 years ago, and more. And we can complain about it and going, oh, they'll care all of a sudden. But I think for me, the future is how do we keep the debate on our terms? How do we keep the mission of principle, the mission of passion, the mission of just being there for young people at its heart? Because I agree that young people are the victims of this planet. That sounds very disempowering, John. But let's be honest, if you want to talk about war and conflict, young people and women are the least culpable, but the most likely to suffer. You want to talk about the economies, generation after generation, country after country, you have general unemployment, you have youth unemployment. You want to talk about mental health, you want to talk about suicide, all these topics, it smashes young people the hardest. But just because we have an element of victimhood of probability doesn't mean it's victimhood of possibility. Because we're actually the architects of real change as well. And I think we as a youth work sector are in the game of helping to fertilize those prospects. And I think what we need to look at now as the future is understanding where we're at now. And I think what I need to hear, why I'm here, did anyone feel like your battery just died a little bit the last year or so? Maybe in some ways it energized, but there's something about reconnecting with us to then think about how do we then reconnect and inspire others. So for me, the future is whatever you feel it needs to be, because we are it. And what we pass on to other young people and those we work with is really critical. And at the toughest points in my life, I've never found pessimism or inaction to be the solution. So the conversation for me at this summit is what is the shape of our optimism? What is the shape of our ideals, our actions that we want to take forward? Because if we change our approach, that is the greatest way of, I was going to say infecting the minds, but I'm going to change that term for now, of impacting positively the minds of those young people we seek to support. And in terms of trends coming up, I'm sure that's going to come out in some of the questions. So thank you very much, and it's great to be here.
Takes a while, the microphone changes. Nevertheless, it was great to hear also about a bit of resilience, and I think your message really, or at least I felt that it built a bit of the resilience. It gave me a bit of motivation back to be on this sector and to fight and to work on what I believe. So thank you so much. Connecting a bit with our topic of young people who are in a NEET situation, either in employment, education, or training. How do you see their involvement in the future? Because you talked about envisioning the future, having a possibility to look at data and create a gooder option of the future. But are the young people that are in a NEET situation, do they have access to that? Can they do that? Are they competent enough to do that? How do you see that connection?
Okay, let me try to answer this question in a different perspective. Yes, it was a brilliant speech about the change, right? About progress. But on the other hand, while we were talking about the NEET situation, it's a, how can I say, it's a very fast switching situation, you know. That's the opportunity here. You can be NEET at one moment, and 2 months later you can find yourself in the labor force because you have the power. You're young. If you had access to education, that's one starting point for you to be in the labor force. So it's a in and out process for many young people in the labor force, in the employment sector. But here, what we need to think is, will it continue this way? Will young people be able to be in and out in the employment industry in the future? So in the past, or with the current employment composition, with the skill composition, competences that we need today in today's economy, it might seem, yes, it will continue for a while. But when we are talking about future, it's not that easy, because the skill gap between what the employers will be looking for in the future and the skills that we have been providing for the students for a while, or the young people, is getting in a bigger manner. On the other hand, it is now more expensive for any students to be able to get the skills and competences that will be needed in the future. it's not getting cheaper. It's getting more expensive. So that is one thing that we have to think in our preferred future, and we have to see these signals of change and to reverse them for the sake of these young people. That's one thing that we have to keep in our pocket while we were making policies, while we were making projects in the field. So, and here, what the main problem is about ignorance. Okay, in the policy making process, in the project making process, we're always continuing to the issues as it was in the past. So we're making the plans with the traditional ways. And if you're talking about young people, they're the destructive power of the change, right? They're bringing new things. They're open to the new things. So we have to figure out those new things together with them, and with the employers. And in this ignorance, there are four dimensions. The first thing is known knowns. So we know something that we know. And there are some known unknowns. We know that something can happen, like pandemics, for example. In World Health Organization's papers, you could see that pandemics was mentioned in 2015. In 2016, there could be a pandemics coming to the world. But we ignored it. We didn't care about it. And now the same thing is happening to the young in the young employment industry, with a huge breakdown with the pandemics. Because before the pandemics, without the pandemics, we would see the same situation, but the pandemics broke down it further. What we need to think is that what is this known unknown? The young people will have they're facing more unequal conditions with some other peoples, with some other young people in the education sector, in the employment sector. And that is one thing that we need to work on, is the skill gap. And we have to identify those skills and competences. While I was coming here, I could talk about big data. I could talk about artificial intelligence. I could talk about machine learning, or the other technology trends that we can, that we are facing day by day. But the thing is, there are four main competences that we have to provide to the young people. And whenever I talk with the psychologists or people dealing with the behaviors of the workers or needs, these four competences are: first, discovering the opportunities, because the change is coming with the opportunities. So we have to figure out the way to show these young people how to figure out the opportunities around them. The second thing is communication and leadership. How they're going to lead, how they're going to communicate with those opportunities. And the third one is making move. Maybe this is the most important part. We have to figure out ways for the young people, even in NEET or not, to move in the labor market. Even this itself needs making a move by the young people to look for a job. Who are the needs? They gave up, right? But we have to convince them, or we have to provide some skills and competences for them to feel that they will make a move. And the last thing is the sustainability and adaptability. Because if you look to the employers, and I think this is getting very common. We were talking in Turkey that it's the young unemployment rate is around now 27% in Turkey, and the regular unemployment rate is around 13%. And the young people are saying that we cannot find jobs. On the other hand, the employers are saying they have an opposite approach. They're saying that we cannot find people to employ. And so there's a gap here. If you talk with a young person in Turkey, he's gonna say that I'm looking for a job, and then 1 year later he gave up. But the employers are still looking for somebody who would like to work with them with enough skills and competences. So we need to measure that. What is the problem? And as an academics, I teach at the university. I'm really aware that the universities are coming behind the private industry. We don't understand what those guys in the high-tech companies are doing, what they're producing. We're trying to understand, but it is far beyond our knowledge. So maybe youth workers or youth organizations could help the universities to understand what those guys are creating, and could also help the young people to be able to get these competences with the universities. maybe that's the way of cooperation in the future.
Thank you so much, because that was exactly the connection that I also want to make also with your experience, John, because you mentioned the youth workers also for building resilience. But I was wondering, how do you see the role of the youth worker in the future? And also maybe connected with the skill gap that you were mentioning, do you see a connection there, or how do you envision that this should happen in the future?
Well, I want to challenge a couple of things first of all, because I don't think the space for youth work is to fit in with universities to keep the big businesses happy. I disagree. I don't think there's an unemployment issue because young people don't have enough skills. I think actually what we're seeing when you listen to industry, when you listen to the trade unions or ILO, what they talk about is we can give them the technical competencies ourselves. We don't need some university down the line or college. We'll bring them in-house. We'll put them on our own graduate programs, our own training schemes. We can get them the technical know-how, knowledge. The part that's the challenge is around connecting young people with their sense of capability, with self-esteem, with confidence, communication skills, reasoning, interactions with others, teamwork. That used to be called soft skills. I bet everyone's put that in a funding bid at some point or another. They're not soft anymore. They're measurable. They matter. It's what business says they need the most. And that's something we've always done extremely well, and we should continue to talk about. Skills is critical, and understanding the pipeline from childhood through to schooling, to college, to university, to employment. If we can find some sort of cohesion and symmetry of skills into the market, great. But the world's changing as well. The old days of growing up, leaving school, going into the traditional industries, usually manual or into management, and that was the kind of expectation, usually because of geography, it's changed. I think young people get it. You go to the office by walking to your laptop, sitting in your bed. It's a bit different in my head. The bit I want to talk about is systems. And I want to ask the question, why? I disagree from the comment earlier on that sometimes NEETs look lazy. I disagree that they can come in 1 minute and leave the next. I think that's an unhelpful challenge because NEETs is a cohort. And I hate the term as well. My country doesn't use it. We've moved away from that language. Why are they NEET? Somebody from my background, with my demograph, is more likely to go to prison than university. That's not an accident. That's not in passing. That is because the promise of adults, of power holders, have built a systematic society which puts youth down and keeps their head under the water, depending on usually your socio-economic background. The promise of employment is dead. Oh, what? I put myself into heaps of debt, work my ass off, tell you all how great you are, be subservient to a traditional knowledge base, and then I get some job with terrible conditions. I can't raise a family. I'm on minimum wage, and that's sometimes on a good day. And then we complain that young people are not optimistic. You're lazy. You don't want to work. Hello, Einstein. For me, we have a job to redefine those paradigms and smash them up a little bit. And do you know what? Maybe it's flying cars and there's something about AI, but AI is great and young people are digital natives. But you know what? Fine. See, when they're displacing and they're starting to mechanicalize hundreds of thousands of entry-level physical jobs, it's actually not all a positive story. So the part around skills is exciting around how do we start to say that the old sloth-like education system catch up. And it's the paradigm for me is we can't, as a community sector, be stuck between business and formalized education is sort of curving off the sharp parts. We need to carve out a real understanding that personal and social development, unlocking people's aspirations, connecting them with their sense of possible, is what's important. There's no point being the most intelligent human being in the village if because you happen to be a trans person, everyone's treated you like shit, and all of a sudden you have no self-love, respect. You're not measuring yourself on your intellectual capabilities. You're dealing with the realities of having a sense of home, of belonging. I'm not going to be intellectually thinking about the trends and systematic process of artificial intelligence if my job is to get out of being homeless. So there's something about the system addressing of inequality, of why people become NEET. And we know that there's generational exclusion, LGBT groups, young girls, internally displaced peoples, people from conflict, people from travel or gypsy back. There's all these cohorts that we need to understand that role to play, because NEETs isn't an accident. There's also an inbuilt discrimination and prejudice there. And I think that's what we all do extremely well. If you speak to NEET young people versus young people generally, the population of them that speak positively about informal learning and youth work goes higher than the average young person, because they struggle because of poverty and trauma is the two big words for me, poverty and trauma, to engage with economic opportunities. There's also something about the psychological connection that is also really, really important. So I think the system change is a conversation that we as advocates, because we're also activists if we're youth workers, is also a really important one. And how do we change the health sector? How do we get in to the policing sector, the fire brigade sector, the university sector, to take a youth work approach in those settings to make them more inclusive, as well as us being the inclusive people on our own?
Thank you very much for challenging. I think when we challenge some norms, we also learn from that and we expand the possibilities. Because you were also mentioning the 4 competencies that were wishful, like good to have in the future. But I was just wondering how the trends that we are envisioning to have, like you were also mentioning artificial intelligence, climate change, migration, how this will affect the future. And because some of the competencies that you were mentioning are soft skills, but still then how do you develop some skills with IT, with technology development, how you can keep doing that connected with the trends, how the trends will affect?
Yeah. That was the point that I would like to make or add to the John's points. So whenever we discuss these topics, you know, emotions are really important. I can understand that. But there is a realistic part. Yeah, we can be very self-confident. We can be like, you know, very passionate about doing things. But apart from that, we need, and we can have some examples which can be exceptions. You know, like, you know, you can start in a village and then build on that, build on that, build on that. Maybe you're lucky. But do we really need to leave those young people to their luck? So it's not limited to luck. So we need to provide some at least some certain amount of useful tools that they will be able to use. So maybe the companies can teach you how to work in that company, but they will not spend time to teach you mathematics, which that mathematics and physics, the life sciences, brought us to this technological level. So this is very important. Whenever I join to this kind of technological conferences, you know, one thing that I really don't want to hear, that, you know, the education is something like not that important. With, of course, the access to information today is easier than ever. So it gives us the chance to be able to use this knowledge for our benefit. But apart from that, we need the basic skills and the competences that we need to build on that. And artificial intelligence or the blockchain or the augmented reality, virtual reality, the tools that are getting more important day by day by the industry, not only for the big industry, but also small and medium-sized enterprises, but also for the startups. They're building on that. Look at the success stories that you heard in the last 10 years. Most of them are using these technologies, developing those technologies, and trying to identify the need by the society, and they're not going to the garages and then creating those innovations. That has a huge hundreds of years scientific progress. They use it. So we have to create more. And one of the I think one of the most important skills during this process is to, at least for our educational systems, if we are going to do something innovative in our educational systems, we need to adapt these educational background to be able to proper to these today's analytical skills, like the life mathematics, like the coding, but to be honest, sometimes we're doing a little bit more discriminative. I was a young person, 20 years ago, I was young. Maybe some of the NGOs here were working for me to be able to adapt myself to the society. So youngs, olds, it doesn't matter, for whole labor market. We need to create an educational system which is not leaving anything to the luck. We have to provide a good analytical background from the primary school to the end of the university. And maybe one thing that we need to consider, that the universities or colleges are not only for scientific progress, but also for the sake of those young people. That's one observation. Last sentence. That's also a case that I face in Russia, in Brazil, in Turkey, in most of the developing countries. We scientists at the classroom behaving to the young people like they're going to be the scientists, both in terms of curricula, both in terms of our approach. But just only 2 or 3% of those classes are preferring an academic career. Apart from them, they need practical skills, which we don't leave the companies to be able to teach them at the workplace. So that is one thing. And most of those, now we can talk about these coding, these new technologies, and it's most of us, I think, are aware of those skills now.
And my next question to you, John, will be how this will affect the work of a youth worker, how the future trends, the actual trends will really affect our work as a youth worker.
Thank you. I think we already do a really good job. We make so much happen with so little. I always say we're a very thin sector. We're skinny. We make lots happen with small amounts. And I think the stuff around hands-on vocational learning, direct skills, is something I fully agree with. But I think there's something about us as a youth work sector to understand how we empower young people to step into the other facets of society. We can't hold on to them forever. And when we say, what do we mean by youth work? We are an approach, right? We understand informal learning. We understand relationships. Young people engage with us out of choice. They're equal partners. So in the UK at the minute, the big word is co-production. That idea that young people or the learner is an equal stakeholder in the teaching process. Now, even to a traditional lecture theatre or classroom, that idea in itself is radical. And the third principle we talk about in my country is every young person chooses to attend. Every young person is an equal partner to whatever adult is in the room. And the third point is around the curriculum starts at wherever the young person is. Now, those three things are opposites to the traditional assumptions of education, or certainly schooling when you get the privilege to go. You're told to go, you're a participant, you're passive, and the third point being, it doesn't matter where you're at, the curriculum is set. Your job is to regurgitate the textbooks. But I think we can't just talk about skills. I think what we're also seeing is a huge psychological impact on young people coming out of the last couple of years especially, which was already there, but the cut just got deeper. We need to understand trauma. And I don't know if anyone here's work is specifically around trauma and well-being, but there's a big understanding now moving around something called ACEs. I don't know if people are aware of ACEs. If you know it, you get excited when someone else talks about it, I know. Adverse childhood experiences. It's things that happen young, they're traumatic, they have physical impacts on our brain grows. Whether that's around household instability, death, abuse. The correlation is so strong. Is my country the only country that has made the connection between mental health and prison? My country the only country that understands, and it's not. So for us, I think, to understand the role of trauma in terms of building resilience is really important, because I think what we've got to do coming out of this is understand that young people are not their behaviours. We see the person, not the problem. And I think what we're going to have is a real tsunami of psychological challenge around, we had a keynote speaker saying that they were crying or shaking on an aeroplane. That's someone with strong social capital, who's very experienced, who's a powerful agent in society. What if you were that kid who was already a little bit fragile? What is their hope? What is their chance? So I think we've got that duty to help unlock some of those future trends, which are challenges, which were always there, but are coming along more. And yes, it's passion and it's voluntary, a lot of it, but there's a lot of science and understanding behind our approaches, and the evidence is becoming more and more compelling. So I'd please ask you to think about that adverse childhood experience, ACEs stuff. It's some really powerful indicators. There's lots of metrics in it, so people who enjoy the measurement stuff, you'll have a field day. So I think for me, that's some of the trends coming up. And the last thing I want to say from this pandemic that we're in and over and dealing with and wherever we are, is that young people are also the solution. In my community, it was young people rising up to be the answer, not just the victim. And I think it's really important that young people, when they're able to help contribute something and achieve something, in turn, that's the best school, that's the best education. And I think some of these programs, like I was speaking in the group earlier, we put on let's have a Friday evening catch up on Zoom and we can play games. No one came. Young people didn't care. Did any of you go, oh my God, we're actually really bad at our jobs. We don't know how to engage our own young people and we're the good guys. I think that was a global phenomenon, and that's cool. But actually the way we found we got them, my day job closed down overnight. I lost every speech I had. I was doing trainings and speaking in about 15 countries. It was all cancelled in 3 days. So I turned my attention to one of the charities that I set up. And what we did is, rather than seeing young people in the poorest communities as victims who need saved or helped or protected, we activated them as volunteers. We got them involved. We gave them a sense of purpose. And that became such a powerful tool. And in turn, the skills and connection with esteem and all that started to form. And for me, I think it's those kind of examples of active participation that's going to be really critical. It's, for lots of us in this room, it's really normal. But understand that for lots of other industries, that's radical action. That's radical ways of thinking about it.
Thank you. Yeah, indeed, I think that the young people are the solution. Also thinking of the fact that we are building a future where, Ozzy also said, we will not be there, most probably, but the young people will be. So they will live what we are discussing nowadays. Before moving on with questions, we have the comments online. I cannot see them all, but maybe if my colleagues can point out few of the comments, and if not, if you have any questions from the audience that you would like to ask further on. We discussed about future trends a bit, about resilience, about youth worker, about youth works, data as well. There are already a few comments, so Voya?
Yeah, the first comment was that you have a nice shirt, so this was the first comment. Both, no.
You didn't like mine?
Yeah, the other comments are more or less similar. I will point out actually one which was mentioned a few times. Do we really have to take care about what's going to happen in the future, or we should just keep our life and enjoy our life, enjoy the moment and so on? So this is one of the questions that I would see as most important or most common. And another, when we talk about policies, about decision makers creating future for us, do young people actually really can influence policy making processes, or is it just on the paper? So those two questions are maybe the most important.
Yes. Si, da, ya. International. I wear this shirt on purpose. I'm glad you asked about it. I don't know if it translates, but there's a phrase in English: when life gives you lemons, wear them on your chest with pride. And that's a reminder for me that even now, like, who am I to sit on an international panel with a televised economist, professor, expert? Like, there's a bit of like, do you ever feel like you're an imposter? How did I get here? Like, genuinely, that's my reminder of that sometimes it's the parts of ourselves we hide the most that is the loudest comments for the room. So there's a reminder of that. It was Margaret Mead who said, never underestimate the power of a small but committed group of citizens to change the world. It's the only thing that ever has. And I believe that of young people. I believe it's young people that generate the energy for change, create movements. But a future trend as well that we can look at is two things. We're seeing increasing industrialization, yes, but there's also social trends around the political process. The narrative is we're increasingly becoming more socially liberal as a planet, although there's huge exceptions emerging there. But if you look at it over decades, that's happening. But young people are being left outside of the traditional corridors of power. We're not traditionally heard. In countries, young people are not given a right to vote. Lots of countries, nobody's given a right to vote. I say I have one hero in my life, and it was a young friend of mine from Libya, Tawfiq, who was shot dead at traffic lights because he wrote a blog of the dream to vote one day, and that was radical, which is sad. So I was the kid who chose to talk about the stories that upset the politicians, that didn't suit the pamphlets and the manifestos and the narratives. And it's amazing what you can make happen when you speak out. And I'd say to any young person, sometimes just being yourself is a political act of radicalism, to own your own truth. And it needs to feel possible, because the alternative, what is it? It's hopeless. So for me, on that point, I think that's really important. And a future trend is politicians are now going to be really panicky and busy to look like they've fixed the pandemic. I think that's a false story. We need to continue to talk about all the issues that matter. And they're going to argue that that's why there's not enough funding now and they have to respond medically. But we need to also talk about the social impacts that keep going forward. I think we might all find it harder to secure funds and to be recognised, parity of esteem. And I think there's something really important about young people and the advocates of young people, as a sector, speak as one. It's not just doing, it's also amplifying a voice. Because how many people have an advocacy or public affairs part of their organisation? Yeah, very, very few. It's really interesting. That's one of the big transformations in the work that I've done that I found really helpful. Rather than just sitting complaining that the funding programs were wrong or young people were living in too much poverty, we had a job to help inform the processes that make the money, that set the personality of the funding, and help to get to the root cause of the systems that create NEETs in the first place. Because so often we've got so much insight, but because we're not a professor or not a politician or we're not the chief medical officer or something, we're somehow made to feel like we're less intellectual or we have less to offer. And that's bullshit. We've got a lot to give. We've got a lot to offer, because I think we're experts in our communities and our young people in which we work with. So please keep pushing that voice as loudly as we possibly can.
Yeah, sure.
One of the questions was, do we have to plan the future or just enjoy the time? Why do you think that there are substitutes? Can't I plan my future in the meantime while I was getting fun? It's not something like substitutes. The idea is here, one of the, for example, experiences that I had in the last 3 years. I have a class every year in September to January. I'm working with 30 students for Foresight. We're trying to identify the preferred future and developing ideas about this feature, how to realize this feature, how to achieve this feature. And what I noticed that, this is a kind of class, an elective class, but not for the students, but for me. I elect the students. They apply, and then I pick the students. In the first year, I picked the best ones in the other classes that I know. So 30 students. It was nice. The students were very hardworking, creating really good stuff, etc., etc. In the second year, I decided to just pick 10 best performers, 10 middle performers, and 10 poor performers. And what I saw that if we try to figure out a way for these students to plan their future while they're having fun, then you can get really a huge, efficient, or creative feedback from the students. It doesn't matter either they're best performers or poor performers. They're very creative. And so if we push them to make distinctions between enjoying or making plans or doing this or not, then that's the boring part. They want to, at least if they want to do both, let's leave them the space to do the both. We don't need to push them to make choices. That's the main idea. That's why we the first thing that I wrote here, that the future is a set of possible and impossibilities, but we need to reach to the preferred one. That's the idea.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or thoughts that you have after this discussion? Online as well. So if you have comments for the ones that are online, please write them on the comment box. We are here, we can read it. So we are in two worlds. I would never imagine that when I was starting my youth work, that I can be in two parallel worlds. But here we are. Any questions?
If there are no questions, there are two options.
Yes. Yeah, we have.
The message is well received or not received?
Yes, exactly.
Maybe I have a question. If I may. John was saying about mentioning that new technology, technological transformation, and all this digitalization is actually killing workplaces, entry-level jobs, and so on and so on. Do you think, in a moment like that, a lot of jobs that young people without skills and experience would actually do are now replaced by machines? Do you think that digitalization is actually bringing more positive or more negative influence to young people entrance to the job market and so on and so on? So like, for sure there are pro and contra, but like, can you try to make it more explained?
Yeah, I guess, well, I'm not expert, I just have a viewpoint on this, but I think I wouldn't say it's killing entry-level jobs, but it's going to transform it. And we're naive at best if we don't recognize that. The nature of employment opportunities is going to change. Digitalization is absolutely an overwhelmingly positive thing. The world is the smallest it's ever been. It's connecting us, access to information. We can go online and find people like us and who like us, and we can learn things digitally, and we have open universities, and it's full of great stuff. We can self-teach. It's tremendous, and but automation of industry is going to transform the pipeline of employment, service, and therefore education. So the point around skills and stuff is the right one, and we need to be tangible. The point I make is that's like dealing with one small element of or one small piece of the menu. But the biggest problem is the banquet table of society in itself, and that's the inequality that we need to address. Because it will change, but guess what will happen? The comfortable, privileged, richer people will get all the great jobs, and the rest of us will fight, and we'll still have needs. It will be entrenchment. So how do we use the change? And I won't call it positive or negative, it's a reality. The digitalization, the automation of society, it is a choice around how we engage with it. So I think we have a duty to help advocate and ensure the communities in which we defend, the young people which we support, are finally able to access a fair slice of the emerging opportunities, the emerging markets. And I think that part's the differences. How do we ensure that those people are able to access those opportunities is really important. And so I think it's overwhelmingly a positive thing, but it's negative in the sense that huge barriers come. To move it away just from seeing young people as future adults to be given a salary and be, agents of labor. It's not just about jobs. There's also a broader sense of living your purpose, living your truth, being yourself. I think that's easy to sound corny or cheesy, but it's true. And there's a double-edged sword around the impacts of mental health with digitalization as well. I can connect with the world on Instagram and message people, but it also makes me feel fat. I can connect with brand new friends around the world, but I also going to get trolled and attacked. That's really serious for young people. I don't know if anyone else finds this even in youth work, but have you ever tried to run a session when they're sitting on Snapchat with each other? You're not getting it. They're not listening. And I know it sounds silly, but these are the participation barriers to overcome. But our challenge, and it comes back to what we said, is ask them what they want. Let them design their own pathways. Young people are the experts on young people. So no, they're not going to think the future is going to be scary, but if you break it down to what do you want, what is your goals, what is your passion, you'll get there. They'll start to come on board and you'll start to win them over. And the most intellectual thing we can do is play snooker, play pool. Get the post-it notes out, sit and play Minecraft. You create the relationships, and then you build the emotional currency, and you can take them on a journey because they trust you. At that point, it starts to work. So it's the same with the digitalization process for me.
Thank you. Do we have any data how the digitalization will change the world, or is already changing?
Yeah, it's almost we're in the middle of that. So most of the job, according to World Economic Forum, 55% of the jobs will be disappearing, and the new ones are coming. So there are many other things. And for example, the recycling process will be another item for the next 10 years. Now the ratio of workers in the world who would be recycled was around 25%, but with the fast digitalization process, it's going to be like 65%. So we're not going to talk only about the young people, but we're going to also talk about the adults. So because they're gonna need new skills. So it's an opportunity. It's also a threat. So the threat is coming with the opportunity. But one thing that we need to think that there is no homogeneous youth. There is no homogeneous digitalization. So there is no definite rights or wrongs. There are benefits and costs. So what we need to think is that, what will be the cost of this digitalization process to the societies, and what will be the benefit of this digitalization process for the societies. And this is also different for each kind of society. The Turkish digitalization will not be like the German digitalization, or the benefits and the costs of the German digitalization will not be the same as the Turkish digitalization process, because each country, let's put the countries aside, each region, each local community has different let's say characteristics. So this digitalization process will bring something different to those areas. Let me give you an example. We're doing a class again about this digitalization process, and there are some international students and Turkish students. The local and the English version of the program is full of international students, but the Turkish program is full of Turkish students. This was a debate. Will digitalization be good for economy or for people in the future? How will it affect the inequalities in the world? The international students will defend that the digitalization will decrease the inequalities in the world, whereas whole Turkish students defend that it's going to increase the inequalities, because these students were living in another country and came to Turkey and figured out that this is bringing some opportunities. But the local ones because they're limited with the local society, they figured out that no, this is going to make my job harder. I'm not. There will be new jobs are coming. I'm going to be paid less. So this is the difference. So if we use the globalization together with the digitalization, and if we are going to try to identify these benefits of the digitalization for whole societies, then we will deal with the costs. It's not a costless process.
Thank you very much. Speaking of digitalization, we have.
Yeah, we have a question from Italy, actually.
Hello, Italy.
Hello, Italy. Buongiorno. Yeah, the question is, we have to distinguish, or the comment, we have to distinguish between passive resilience and the active resilience. Who is the subject of the action? Who establishes the objectives of the action? For whom, for what? And more before all, why do resilience if all actions have any impact on reality? So someone is challenging really, really much. So this is from Italy, and then we have more questions on the wall later on.
Okay, resilience.
I don't know if I need passive resilience or active resilience for this answer, but the questioner's position on that I don't know how they view those definitions, but what is resilience? It's not about stopping people having problems and struggle in life. It's about facing life, but feeling like you're never going to drown. You can deal with it. You can swim emotionally. You can deal with stuff. You can ask for help. Trauma, exclusion, dealing with resilience is one part of a broader strategy around mental health and well-being. We understand lots about that. It took me 20 years to talk about my trauma, to talk about abuse as a child, to talk about being, taking, still to this point, 66% of my life to accept my true identity, to talk about my family, to love who I love, to be where I'm from. That has impacts on people. And there's trauma responses. One thing for me, and I know this, that's why I do that little poem at the beginning. A trauma response is to stay in control. Because I remember what happens when I give someone else control of me and it didn't feel good. I find it difficult to accept help or to ask for help. Because growing up, I always had to be the child that fixed the broken adults around me. And there was expectations that creates a survival instinct. So when we think about building resilience, some of it is very medicalized, but a lot of it is socialized. And I think what we want to do is I don't know what active and passive resilience means per se, but I would phrase our role as youth workers and community workers to help young people realize what greatness they have inside them already. There's so often I see beautiful young people think that they're awful. They're defining themselves because of their histories and what they're not. They won't talk about the future because they don't believe they deserve one. They're not the kind of people that succeed. They're not the kind of kids that are happy. So a key part of resilience, and yes, there's one-on-one coaching, there's mentoring, there's psychological counseling services, and these are really important. But I think it's not just medical solutions. There's also a community socialization solution that we bring to the table, which is what we do extremely well. And to researchers and others, the evidence is good, but it needs to be more. I think we need to study that stronger to understand the connections between youth work and informal learning, where we create conditions for a young person like me, the first time, to be told that I can achieve something, that I can deal with it, that it's going to be okay, that you're going to get through it. And sometimes it's that simple. The most powerful act of resilience a youth worker can have on a young person is to genuinely believe in them and see their actual resilience. And to realize that you yourself are resilient. Because again, we can't live as pessimistic, beaten up, unhealthy people ourselves and expect young people to take hope from us. I can't cover up all my stories and my struggles and my issues and expect young people to tell me all their problems. You've got to go first. That is leadership to open. So I think we have a duty as a youth work sector in terms of moving forward beyond the pandemic. Those kids that lived in their caves and were scared to come out are sometimes a little further back. And those people that were really confident have taken a step back too and are maybe questioning themselves. And I think we've got the job to help nudge them to remind ourselves that you're all extremely capable. We can do that. And I've been at some really dark times in my life, and a lot of the work I do, I talk about identity and suicide and mental health. And it's really, in the words of the famous philosopher Jessie J, it's okay not to be okay. And whether that's passive or active, I don't think I care at this stage, but the strategies of the programs we run to bring people together, to believe in them, and to help them redefine the question, schooling and education, examinations, what do they ask? What's the question? Ultimately, it's how good are you? It's a metric. That's dangerous to some young people. What's the question as a youth worker? It's not how good are you? It's how are you good? It's in which ways are you good? Because everyone's an expert in something. So, and I think when we tap into these things and help them unlock that passion, they start to recode their sense of self, and then I think resilience and empowerment can come.
Thank you so much. I can connect with so many elements that you mentioned. We have one question. I don't know, do you want to react on resilience or not for now?
We have maybe an economical question?
Yes.
So there's a question what the science of economy are predicting when it comes to future, like what economical scientists would say about future. There is a question on the wall.
So I think that's
What science of economy teaches us about the future trend? Okay, there's no specific. In fact, all social sciences are related with the future. Okay, the science itself is trying to explain what is going on, but on the other hand, because of the fast change, now we are trying to explain what is gonna happen. So it's not a specific economics area, but my field is innovation economics, the economics of innovation. So we need to work on more about what is coming next. So that is one thing, and maybe that part could be interesting for you. But especially with, it's a multidisciplinary area. As I showed here, this is a model that we have been working in the last 4 or 5 years with scholars around Europe and Russia. So what we try to figure out is not only in economics or in macro level, but also in the micro level, in the organizational level, how we can identify the preferred future, and how you can use the grand societal challenges or the global problems to increase the innovative and the creative capacity of the young people. This is a very nice method, and if you want to benefit from that, I think it's an open access material in the foresightedu.net. So you can access all the materials that we created so far. And if you need further information, you can also contact me to work together. We're very open to collaborate in this foresight methods.
We have one question there.
Yeah, here I am. I also wrote on the wall about how I think advocacy is unavoidably a part of everyone's job here. But it gets very difficult at times when you hit a wall, when you meet a decision-making adult who is sitting at a table and has been sitting at a table for years and years and years. And of course, they are resistant to change, which is natural, but we're living in such a fast-paced, changing world. We have to do something. Youth are not people of the future. Youth are people of yesterday and today. And that was the point, thank you, that I tried to get across at a panel yesterday, or the day before yesterday, with the Vice President of the European Commission, who then referred us to use a multilingual digital platform, whatever, never heard of it. And I said, okay, but that's not how we're going to make any changes. She said, if you don't write a summary of our conversation in that platform, it's like this conversation never happened. Well, why are we here in the first place, right? So it gets difficult sometimes to keep, raising your voice, to keep pointing out the obvious, but someone has to. So I think that will be us. And in terms of resilience, and thank you for sharing everything that you did, I think it's also important to think about our resilience as resilience of youth workers. and to find a way to charge our batteries. So in terms of that, I don't know, do you have any advice or an example of a good practice? You know, when something like this happens, in a panel, for example, where there were 30 young people from Western Balkans, exactly, raising their concerns, and they got shut down. You know, I feel like that's being put aside, and we're not getting the publicity that we should be getting. The voice is not going any further. No one is sharing the tweets. But yeah, I mean, is there something that you can recommend we do?
Yeah, I think just even the way you phrased the question makes me feel empowered and is inspiring, and I like it. And having worked in a number of countries in Balkans and Western Balkans and other places, I think I've been to like eight to 9 countries doing youth programs, whether it's Australia and Japan or Bosnia and Macedonia, I don't know, forgot what it's called. Whatever you're happy with, that the one I'm talking about. And yeah, it's like if I'm Scottish or British and I'm like, oh, doesn't watch The Crown. I don't know, like, but yeah. But we're disruptors sometimes, and that's our job. When people aren't listening, then we need a persistence to keep going, or why. And I think there's something about crystallizing our purpose. Because, tell me a human rights issue that hasn't demanded, unfortunately, persistence and death extremes and fragile relationships and perseverance to overcome. We'll be called an exception until everyone catches up and realizes that we should have did it all along. We're seeing that with climate. We're seeing that with gender roles. We're seeing that still. It's embarrassing. We're talking about that in the context of racism or getting rid of the lazy binary of gender and all these topics that are kind of swirling. But I was the kid that was never supposed to succeed, and I had all these measurements of problems. Got involved as an activist, and I found my voice, and that became my home. And then in turn, I became the volunteer, and I got the opportunity, and then I ended up running the parliament and did some TV shows, and it just sort of escalated. But it was all about breaking the mold. And what people would say is, oh, that's the passionate guy who really cares. But let's talk about the realistic stuff. See, if I spoke about the realistic stuff, I'd be a bad version of everyone else. And we have to beat our own drums and march to that. And I'm not sorry, like I said, for standing up to be resilient with the advocacy. And what I learned is to just go out and run programs. It's like getting on a hamster wheel and just running. You're not changing the wheel. You're going to collapse. So how do we help change the bigger systems that which create the socio-economic struggles that our young people have to live in? Is the crusade. And I've been in the room in front of the Queen and 3 different presidents, and I walk out going, did I defend what I care about correct? Or did I go, nice to meet you, and just be all nice and ask for a selfie and look important? And the truth is sometimes I do that because it's hard to always get it right. But speaking truth to power, in my view, is a core responsibility of us as community change makers, for us as youth workers. Youth work is political. It might not be partisan. And I know in some countries to do that and to speak out is more dangerous than other places. But we need to find creative ways of staying radical and inspiring young people to speak out for what they believe in, because nothing will change otherwise.
Thank you so much. I will just challenge a bit, like, yeah, I think we need the resilience and all the force, and in the same time, we need well-being of the youth workers. And we need to find the balance of not to burn ourselves in doing that.
Sorry, it's me again. There's something about, as a leader or a youth worker, you cannot be available 100%. You need to switch off. And I'm a bad teacher of this lesson, but we need to learn, like, I climb mountains, I drink too much whiskey, I go on apps that I waste time on, and sometimes it's good to be frivolous. Like, it's important to have that balance and find out what you enjoy, like, and go and be stupid, like, go and have fun, but don't feel the sole responsibility that you need to be available and responsible 24 hours. A good friend of mine who's a huge hero of mine, a chap called Kumi Naidoo, if anyone's heard of Kumi, was the global head of Greenpeace, but he was a freedom fighter alongside Nelson Mandela in South Africa. And he said to me, John, don't give your life for what you believe in. Give the rest of your life. And so something about, you can't fill up anyone else's cups if your own jug is empty. So keep yourself topped up. And if you don't make time for your well-being, you'll be forced to take time for your illness.
Wow, powerful message. I think slowly we will go towards the end of the session. Thank you very much for the journey from data to emotions to experience to future. As a last question for both of you, I would have, not as a message towards, but my question will be how you would like to be remembered.
My preferred future. Huh?
Your preferred future, exactly.
I think everybody here is doing the same stuff. Why are you dealing with the young people? You're doing it in an NGO or in an organization, and I'm doing it at the university. So what I want to, if I want to be remembered in a way, then I would like to be remembered as a good professor. That's all.
Thank you very much. And what about you, John? How you would like to be remembered?
Don't remember. It's I don't care. Does anyone care? Like, it's not my business what other people think.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you very much for the online people being online. We will end now the online intervention. Perfect. The ones that are in the room, please stay. We have some announcement for you to make, but the online finishes now. Thank you very much. And also,